Alright, so this is part one of project one. I'm sort of getting my things together. These are all the things you will need to do this project. If there are more things I think of while we're making it, we'll get onto it. So first I'm laying out my canvas. You should all have that. I also have grabbed a wooden board to put my project on. I've got a bowl of water and I've got my handful of tools here, and I'll show you what I've got. So this is a fettling knife. This is what I'm going to use to slice through clay. This is a metal rib. This is going to be for smoothing and shaping. I've got a wooden rib. I'm going to use that to paddle the sides. This is my wooden knife. This is great for finishing seams and doing just a bunch of stuff. And this is my scoring rib. So you can't really see it, but it's got a sharp, like a ridge on the outside, and that's what I'm going to use for slipping and scoring. I've also got some red earthenware slip. You're going to need a little bit of this for this project. You can come to the studio and get a big chunk of it from one of these jars, or you can come work in studio and it'll just be here. So I like to take just a big chunk out, scrape it onto my board. That way I don't have to keep reaching in and out of the jar. And I've got a bamboo paintbrush in my cup of water. So I'll get a little water and I'll get a little slip and I'll use that while I'm attaching these coils. So this is the shape I'm gonna shoot for, and sort of the aesthetic I'm looking for. I've kind of made my measurements and decided what colors I want and the look I want to go for. So it's a pretty simple shape. I also have a ruler, and this is important so that way you can match those measurements and meet your minimum requirements for the project. So I've got my big chunk of clay. These are those blocks of clay that we wedged earlier. I wedged them all into one big lump so I can just sort of grab at and work through. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a good piece, maybe about a half a pound, maybe a little less, and I'm going to make the base for my pot. This is important. You can do this one of two ways. You can pinch it round like I'm doing there, or you can also sort of make a flat slab, which is what I'm going to do here, to the shape that you're looking for. And I want a round shape, so I'm just going to freehand right now, because it doesn't need to be perfect. I'm going to go back and sort of clean it up. But I want it to be fairly thin. That way it's not going to explode on me when I go back. I'm going to hit both sides because, you know, you've got to take care of your details. I'm using my wooden rib now to clean up some hand marks or some canvas marks. And this is just to start cleaning. I've got this lid. And like I said, I was going to freehand it, but then I decided, you know, might as well just use the tools at my disposal. And you can grab any sort of round surface and just make a little cookie cutter stencil on it. It's not like a hard thing to do, and it'll help you out in the beginning, because that's sort of the trick with clay. We just find garbage and it ends up being useful. So what I did there is I made sure I could take it off, so that way by the time I'm done building the pot, it's not going to stay stuck to the base. I've got my scoring rib here, and I'm going to leave some score marks, and I want them to go through pretty deep because the scores are going to create a suction layer between, you know, each coil and the next. And that's sort of like how we do glue. You kind of want to create a porous surface. So after I've slipped and I've scored that, I'm going to set that aside so it sort of gets ready to go. And we're just going to roll some coils here. I like to take a big chunk and then roll one really big fat coil before I start on the thin coil. And then I will start to roll it out. So the trick with rolling coils is to start from the middle and roll your way to the edges. This is going to help you get a thin, consistently sized coil. Now you will find sometimes if you've got like a particularly dominant hand, like my right hand's a little stronger than my left hand, you'll find that hand is going to push a little harder. You don't mean to, but it happens. But basically you're gonna, like I said, I like to roll a fat coil first. That canvas always gets in the way, so make sure it's sort of this tacked down as much as you can. And then, like I said, start from the center and work your way out. And if you can get a full rotation, your coil will be more likely to stay round. Sometimes when you just roll it a little bit like that, you'll get like a flat side. Not that it's always bad, but sometimes if you just want a round coil, it's easier to go all the way through. Now I'm checking to make sure I've got a 1/2 inch thickness, because that's really the recommended thickness for our pot. If it's any thicker than that, it's likely to crack or explode. So if I keep my coils pretty uniform, I'm going to be more successful. Alright, so we're going to speed this up here just because it's a lot of the same thing, and I just want you guys to get a good idea of what coil rolling looks like. I am going to roll out most of my coils for my project, at least the base. Now, if you choose to do this, which I do recommend, that way you can sort of work all in one go and you don't have to keep stopping, and your clay remains the same consistent moisture level. Now, like I said, if you do choose to roll them all out in one go, make sure you wrap them in some plastic or spray them with a spray bottle. That way they don't dry out as you're working, because if you work, if you work fast, they'll probably be fine, but if you work slow, and I do recommend taking your time on this, they might dry out, especially if you're at home and the fan's on, or if you've got some sort of air current running in your house. Your coils could dry out, especially because you have rolled them out so thin. The thinner they are, the faster your piece is going to dry. So if you keep that in mind for future work. Thick work will dry slowly. Thin work will dry quickly. And that's just because the water has enough space to sort of escape from. Those pesky canvases, man, you gotta. So if you're gonna work from home, I do recommend just finding a nice junky table that you don't feel bad about ruining, and maybe taking your piece of canvas, and if you've got like a staple gun or something, just tacking it down, keeping it sort of firm on that table, because you're gonna have less struggle with it. But if you're working from here, we've got wedging tables to do this on, and I would recommend doing that just because the canvas isn't going to go anywhere. So if you were to do this on just the regular table, you'll find that the clay is going to stick, and that's just because the regular table isn't porous like the canvas is. The canvas is there to absorb moisture, which is going to release the clay while you're rolling it. If you go straight onto like a board or table, what's going to happen is you're going to like lose bits of your clay while you're rolling out your coils, and that's not helpful. And especially if it's a little wet, it's going to stick to that table and you're really going to have a bad time.